So let me welcome you all. We're going to go ahead and get started. Maybe a few more people trickle in, but I don't want to diminish any of the time that we have with Srdja because we have to vacate the room right at 5:30. But we're very fortunate that on short notice we were notified by Elaine Popovic that Srdja Popovic was coming through town to work with Marshall Gans on a course they're developing, an online course, and he is a very special figure in my life. I've never met him, but I've known about a lot of the work that he did.
Don't believe everything you read.
Yes. But I've heard eyewitness accounts, so it's even better. Through OTPOR, is that is how you pronounce it? Actually, it sounds like it.
Very good.
And he is currently the founder. He's the founder and director of Canvas, the Center for Nonviolent Action and Strategy. And
I came here thanks to my dear friend from Greece, Elena Popovic. She brought us last year. That was really amazing, fantastic event. I was also a part of Marshall Gans Learning Conference last year, and I'm amazed with the extent of knowledge and quality he has in his online course. First of all, thank you so much for these kind words. One of the last thing you want to do is take yourself too seriously. So it's like just forget all of these stuff. I started I had this lovely class this morning on Northeastern, and my audience was like 17 years old. And then my first question was, how old are you? They were like 17 years. So I was about 19 when I was sucked into the...
Let me just say that we're all young at heart here, so you know.
Yes. Kind of. Well, we started very early, and being an activist in Serbia in the 90s was not really a heroic deed or some kind of commitment, but it was more of a necessity. When you're living in a country which is falling apart, and nobody really believes me, I left my passport in a hotel, but basically I never moved more than 500 meters from my home. And I changed 4 different states and 4 different country codes. I used to live in a place called Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which shifted to be the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which shifted to be the Republic of Serbia and Montenegro, which shifted to be Republic of Serbia. So without moving 500 meters from the place I was born, I efficiently changed 4 places of living. And 4 country codes still gives me hard time sometimes on the borders. So to begin with our experience, we were building the political movement in my country from the scratch. Serbs are very slow learners and very stubborn people, so it's absolutely useless to tell us that the stuff is hot. And we need to touch and witness for ourselves. So we were learning things by doing. We don't read, we don't listen to the advice, we despise authorities, so people can't tell us, okay, don't do this, do that. So this is why we started, and this is also the advantage, because following my work in Serbia, I keep meeting political movements in different stages. And like 1992, we occupied the Belgrade University campus, and we were perfectly happy with our small island of common sense there. And we lived with the rock musicians and celebrities and writers, and we were very cool and very hip. And I bet we would have iPads if we were living in the 21st century. And 3 quarters from there, the business as usual, the Milosevic was arming his tank to continue his wars. And he was perfectly happy with our small zoo. He would bring journalists, show us there, and say, look, these guys are spitting all over me all day. Serbia is democracy, you know. And this is where we learned that occupying the public space and locking ourselves in a small cocoon of the common sense is not enough. And that, yes, you need to reach out to the common people, because common people make numbers, and numbers bring you victory in the popular movements. But we needed to learn this for ourselves. It took us not more than 4 years to do our second attempt. We were in our mid-20s, and this is where we started growing. From 96, 97, we were catching Milosevic stealing the local elections, and then we demonstrated for 100 days, and this is exactly where we learned to do this day-by-day street theater, street marches. We really gained a lot of the experience in this extent. And then we won Actually, Milosevic recognized elections after 3 months of pressure from the street and from international community. And then the Serbian lovely opposition split apart. And then they screw up basically whatever we achieved, including the morale and the situation and everything else. So that was a very stupid way to end up our movement, but this is exactly where we learned that we cannot win without unity. And that if opposition is not a part of the solution, they will definitely going to be the part of the problem. So it took us a few more years to start organizing and building the potential alliances and putting a pressure on the opposition to unite. And then the good international community came with their very clever and productive bombing of Serbia in 1999. They effectively restored Milosevic's authority. They killed a bunch of civilians, including almost my mom, in bombing of TV building in March 1999. For some reasons, NATO loves to proclaim television stations as legitimate military goals. They even hit the Chinese embassy. That was very clever as well. So I mean, throughout this period, we were kind of the frozen. So they give a little bit of the lifeline to Milosevic, but Serbs were back. After the bombing, we restored our movement, we built our numbers, we started with our campaigns. We were quite successful in dealing with the oppression. We were also quite successful in other things like branding, propaganda, messaging. We were effectively building the youth movement. We effectively built the united opposition. Milosevic fell October the 5th, 2000 in bloodless revolution, and some of us went to the politics. I spent 3 years in the Serbian National Assembly, and I know it is very unpopular to tell to the people in Harvard Kennedy School of Law, but if your vision of political life and National Assembly life is that this is something very thrilling, forget about it. That was the second most boring job in my life. Yes, I used to work as an advisor in an insurance company, so there is something more boring than being a parliamentarian. But it was all due to the great Serbian opposition leader, first democratically elected prime minister, the common friend of Elena Papuljas and myself, Zoran Đinđić. While he was here, sitting in parliament, he had some sense because he was really the engine of the change in Serbia. And then he was assassinated in 2003. And for those people who like challenges, there was no real challenge anymore in Serbian politics. So 2004, after getting some crazy invitations from very weird places, first from Belarus and then from Zimbabwe. Then when you see the black people in the streets of Harare protesting and chanting Gotovje, which was the slogan of the Serbian opposition, and then they invite you, then they even think they can learn something from you, then of course your ego grows big and you think that you are running a cool international brand. So we started the organization called Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies. Since then, we learn about the nonviolent struggle. We meet with groups throughout the globe. We also research. We constantly learn. We are in no mean experts in this field. Canvas is run by two persons. One is the second biggest Serbian telecommunication operator, Slobodan Đinović, who is also the biggest founder of my organization. He's a machine engineer. He should build ships rather than operate a company. I'm a freshwater biologist, so this is how far I am from the social science. So please do not expect anything scientific or academic from me. I hardly can help my wife to write the essay with the footnotes. She's studying now the media and communication. So I will start this story with the new spotlight, because we worked for years and we were involved in some of these struggles. Sometimes it was always a kind of the marginal. And then the weird thing happened. And imagine you walk down the street in Cambridge in December 2010, and then you meet the devil. The devil lurks in strange places. And then the devil offers you a bet. Of course, the devil always offers you something. You know, it's not an apple, it's a bet. And he says, this is a bet, I have a crystal ball, and you will look at the crystal ball and you will see the future. And the future is accurate, but you need to go to Anderson Cooper Live morning show and share the future with the rest of the globe. And of course, because curiosity killed the cat, you accept. And here you are sitting in the studio, very relaxed, and telling the following story. Before the end of the 2011, Mubarak of Egypt and Ben Ali of Tunisia will be down and prosecuted. Saleh of Yemen would be on his leave. Assad of Syria would be seriously challenged. Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya and Osama bin Laden would be dead. And the top-war criminal Ratko Mladic would be hacked. 2011 is going to be one of the worst years for the bad guys ever. And Anderson Kapoor gives you a straight Botox look. Like, what the hell this guy is talking about? But he still listens to you. He's still willing to listen. And then you said, on the top of it, there will be hundreds of thousands of people in places like Rome, Frankfurt, Boston, or Zuccotti Park, New York, protesting social injustice, claiming that they got their inspiration from the young Arabs. And you know, the two big people dressed in white come inside the studio, they put a strange shirt on you and take you to the nearest mental institution. Well, but that was the accurate year, and this phenomenon, this YouthQuake, this Arab Spring turning into Mediterranean summer, turning into Western world winter, really lasts and shakes the world. And as we speak, people are debating what are the outcomes, where are we going, what is the rationale. Is 2012 maybe the year of bad hangover? And these are the different discussions. But what is really important is that this thing brought into the spotlight the phenomenon we are very passionate about, and it's very dear to our heart. And this is the phenomenon we call people power. Well, there is a 80 almost year academic living in Boston, Massachusetts. His name is Gene Sharp. He's a great inspiration and teacher, and I may be proud to call him a friend. He was the guy who defined this. He called this thing nonviolent struggle. And whether we call it nonviolent struggle, whether we call it people power, it doesn't really matter. But this is something which really is spreading throughout the Arab world and throughout the world. And as we speak, there are so many different cases where people are using dynamics of people power to change their worlds, to struggle for more rights, to look at struggles from democracy throughout the Arab world, to look at some of the very stalemate struggles for democracy like those in Zimbabwe and Belarus, to look at the very dynamic transitions you have in places like Burma. This is a completely new world, and we want to look and see what is the rationale behind this and why this people power thing is so important. So, because I'm in the academic institution, and because I like to steal other people's idea, this is what Serbs and South Koreans are doing best in the world. I will quote a very nice research done by two young American scholars, very clever girls. You want to bring them here. One of them graduated from Tufts, though. Maria Stefan and Erika Chenoweth are the names. They run out with a great study in 2008 called Why Silver Resistance Work. These two young American scholars examined 323 different campaigns from 19,000 all the way to 2006. Violent campaigns like the First World War, Second World War, Vietnamese War, non-violent campaign like Boycott Nestle, American Civil Rights Movement, Gandhi campaign, all of the usual suspects, probably many campaigns none of us have ever heard about. And they came to the tremendous results. From the point of efficiency, non-violent campaigns has about twice more chances to succeed than the violent campaigns. The outcome is in fact 53% versus 26%. Add a foreign military intervention to the side of the violent campaigns, it will grow to 35%. So violent uprising times good merciful angel of NATO or Soviet Union whatsoever coming in as a cavalry to save you has about 1/3 or less than 1/3 chances to succeed. Non-violent campaigns have more than half chances to succeed. So when you look at a place like Syria, you can say that by turning into firearms, the rebels actually cut their chances to success by half. And this is not my ethical opinion. This is what the research shows. So it's even more dramatic when it comes to what really interests us. You must understand that I'm coming from the struggle for democracy, and whether there is a democracy and stability really concerns me. So I may be a democratic preacher over here, but what you really look at in this study is when you intersect into these societies where the change is made, when you look from from the 5 years distance. Do you have democracy? Do you have stability? And this is where the numbers are even more divisive. If you look at a place like Iraq, Afghanistan, or Libya, where changes succeeded through the civil war, or Kosovo whatsoever, you have about 4% chances to end up in democracy and stability. Compare this to 42% of chances of achieving democracy through the nonviolent struggle. And then, of course, why? Because the way you get to the change in nonviolent struggle is through numbers. You need to mobilize the majority of the people to do your thing. You're opposing the small number of armed people. The only way to win is by gaining numbers. So the real thing which we try to examine is what is the psychological process which turns slaves into participants, and how this psychological process makes people a shareholder of whatever change is achieved, and how it is very difficult to overtake this achievement from them. I mean, look at Egypt. Even smell that Morsi, as the first elected president, grabs power as a dictator, resulting in 100,000 people on the street yesterday. Because people tend to learn like kids. And, you know, if you've ever seen a kid achieving a chocolate through being irritant or yelling or screaming, then you will see that the same other kid repeating these tactics in order to try to achieve whatever the kid wants. And the kids are masters in learning this. So once the people learn the technology of nonviolent struggle, and once they understand that they count, and once they participate in a process, and even more importantly, they participate in a successful process, they're very likely to try to repeat this process. So we try to examine this phenomenon. One more lecture, very interesting. I was looking at the statistics for a recent Reuters conference. This is the possibility of civil war after change. Almost double if change is achieved through the violent struggle. And I will be having a presentation next week in Council of Foreign Relations. And I bet I will have questions about growth of Islamism in Arab countries connected with the Arab Spring. And I would be very glad to remind these guys that I've seen one of these questions. Like, you know, Egypt is this place where Islamist is elected, but this is this place where the peace between Israel and Palestine, or truce, was achieved 2 days ago. Libya is, however, this place where American ambassador is killed a few weeks ago. So, I mean, when you look at the outcomes, it's very, very interesting how the possibility of violent outbreak, how the possibility of democracy. Of course, once you have 26 tribes in Libya, and every single one of them has its own armed militia, and the victory is achieved through defeating Gaddafi, killing him on the street after he probably has been raped. This is, you know, when you have only one tool in the toolbox, and that tool is hammer, every problem tends to look like a nail to try to solve your own problems with this thing. So, to leave out this statistics, we were looking at this last year and we tried to connect the dots. I'm running a very small organization. I have 7 employees. I have some very bright interns. And we tried to find a user-friendly way to teach nonviolent struggle. And one of the things we tried to understand are principles, but also to what connects the dots. When you look at the 2011 YouthQuakes, there are very, very weird dots and weird parallels to look. First, geographically, it may start as the Arab thing, and then it spread into Mediterranean, the homeland of myself and Elaine Popoulias. And the first actual successful anti-austerity slash social justice protest was in a very unlikely place, Israel. And this is what brought the seculars, and it is June 2011, very early after Arab Spring, and it was about the price of housing. And it's the first time that the nationalists were sitting, actually camping for days in the main Tel Aviv square with moderates, and they made Netanyahu make concessions. They were reasonably successful. It moved to Greece, Italy, and Spain, all these countries hit by austerity measures and unemployment, and tend to stay there. Moved into very unlikely places. I was in Frankfurt observing 70,000 people demonstrations. 70,000 Germans demonstrating for social justice. This has never happened in ages. Okay, this is not Afghanistan, so otherwise it would be the world news. But you know, these people were coming from all over Germany. 30,000 people protested corruption and austerity measures in Slovenia last weekend. Slovenia is the coldest and slowest place in Balkans, and the only way you can see 15 or 20,000 Slovenians in the street is when they come to Belgrade for a New Year's Eve to get drunk. Basically, they don't like what they don't do this stuff. They are highly organized people. And then, of course, United States of America and all the Wall Street and all of these kind of the social activism and how it came out. So what connects the dots is very interesting. First, it's normally started by the group of outsiders. It's not started by political parties. It's not started by NGOs. It's not started by the labor unions. From Tunisia to Egypt, to Tel Aviv, to Greece, it's about non-expected political prayers who started this movement. Very like Burma, where students and Buddhist monks actually start the show, not NLP. I'm talking about 2007. So there must be a reason for this. Whether the new generation of protesters are gaining more ground, or they lost faith in existing political leaders, it's yet to be determined. But we're talking also this a generational process. They are using the similar tactics. They are somehow obsessed by occupying public spaces, symbolic public spaces. We're talking about the squares in parliament. They're using a lot of the new media. So basics of what we are learning is to find the commonalities between these struggles. And numerous times you're sitting with a group, you're the size of the typical canvas workshop, maybe 25 to 30 people. And when we are meeting the group of Burmese, Syrians, Zimbabweans, they will tell you the same sentence the day one of the workshop. You guys in Serbia have done tremendous work, but this will never work in Burma. Because the Burmese people are obedient by habit. And then you shift a little bit, you change the continent and the set of faces in the classroom, and now you're sitting with a bunch of Syrians. And they tell you, this will never work in Syria, because the Syrian regime is too oppressive. And then you rewind and go to the place like Zimbabwe and say, this will never work in Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwean people are poor and not educated enough. Well, there is no such thing as a magic Harry Potter kind of stick you can use, and definitely there is no copy-paste. Every struggle is unique, and this is why we let people develop their own strategy and plans, not try to interfere, not try to advise in any means as foreigners. But there is a thing we call Holy Trinity of success in nonviolent struggle. And this is unity, planning, and nonviolent discipline. If you look at the nonviolent conflict as a form of warfare, and you imply the principles of warfare, meaning strategy, tactic, mass, putting your strong points against your opponent's weak points, you will end up thinking about military principles of success, and these are, guess which? Unity, planning, discipline. So why? First of all, it's absolutely impossible to achieve any change without unity. And in different societies, we are talking about the different types of unity. In Serbia, it was achieving the unity among 18 opposition parties, very eager to listen to themselves, very unhappy to see each other, and actually competing for the first place in the opposition. We used to call them chieftains with no Indians, because they had a big egos but not really big organization. Luckily, people like Zoran Đinđić were clever enough to understand, to set aside their own egos and run behind most unlikely presidential candidate, who was, by the way, most likely to win against Milosevic. In Egypt, it was a kind of the religious unity during the days of Tahrir, and nowadays it's going to be the unity between the youth groups and opposition parties and some different pillars. You want to win, you need unity. And it was Burmese monks and students standing alone without the reaction of NLD in 2007. Why chance was missed. And if you want to learn more, there's a perfect short documentary called VJ Burma, which tells a great story about how this chance was lost. And when you look at the Belarusian elections and you see 6 guys running against Lukashenko, you need to order the news to see who won. And same works in some other cases. If Syrian Sunnis can't find a way to include Christians and Kurds in their coalition, Syria will probably end up looking like Lebanon or Lebanon, however you call it. Then the second step is planning, and this was particularly hard for Serbs, because Serbs hardly planned for next week. They planned the New Year's Eve, only they're crazy. And if they have plans for the next year, then they're in this mental institution from the beginning of the story already. But strategic and tactical planning is a must, and there is no such thing as a spontaneous and successful nonviolent revolution. It may exist in a 30 seconds piece on CNN, but only there. In the reality, you probably, if you ever try to mobilize 10 people around the idea, you know how hard it is. And if you ever try to mobilize 100 people around the idea, or the whole class, it's even more complicated. And if you ever try to mobilize tens of thousands of people, you know that it requires a lot of work and planning. It's not something you can achieve just like jumping on the chair, or how they call it, soapbox preaching in the United States. So it's a long planning process. And this strategy is the strategy of small victories. And one thing is to decide where you want to go and have a vision of tomorrow. Completely another thing is to answer to the question, how will you get there? For Serbs, it was clear. We knew Milosevic's vulnerabilities. We set up the elections as our point of building. And then we were building towards the elections. We knew he will steal the elections. Hey, my dear friends. We knew he will steal the elections. We even calculated that he can steal around 200,000 votes. This is how many ballot boxes the opposition couldn't cover in the region of Kosovo. So we came out with a formula that if we bring 200,000 new voters on the ballot box, we will allow this stealing. So we were looking at where to find them, and guess what? It was between 18 and 25 population, very much like Obama margin of victory on the latest elections, and the strategy was similar. And then we knew he will steal, and then we know we need to do something once he steals. But we tried this 96, 97, we knew that this formula works. So for some others, it was other types of planning. So, but you need this plan, and you need to make the small victories in order to achieve a kind of the authority and find people to join you. At the end of the day, it's nonviolent discipline. And whether you're preaching it the way the Mohandas Gandhi was preaching it, or Aung San Suu Kyi, or you're achieving it through the rational explanation to the people that you do hold moral ground while staying nonviolent. And yes, you look like a good guy, like a victim, and this is the good thing to do. So whether you rationalize it or do you put it into religious context is something you can't win with. Because if you have marched 100,000 people and only one agent provocateur or drunk idiot whatsoever with too many Sam Adams winter seasonal lagers in his blood, throwing a Molotov cocktail, guess who is going to take the cover page of tomorrow's newspaper? That one guy. For some reason, media are violent, thirsty at all times. So nonviolent discipline, yes. And then there are some advantages in not being a political scientist. And sometimes I'm so happy that I'm an expert in walleyes and buses and other predatory fishes and the sharks and all of these funny creatures. Because we often argue with political scientists and social scientists when it comes to the conditions. They will always tell you that it's very difficult to achieve victory in Saudi Arabia because average income per capita is higher than X. And then it's even more difficult to achieve victory in a place like Zimbabwe because the average level of educated people is lower than epsilon. And then it's also very complicated to achieve victory in Burma or Cuba because internet penetration is lower than Z. Whatever X, epsilon, and Z are, they talk conditions. We focus a little bit more on the emotions. And if you look at the dynamics of the recent nonviolent movement, especially throughout the 20th century, you can see the very interesting dynamics between fear and apathy, which are the best friends of status quo in society. Fear in dictatorships, apathy in fed-up democracies with a lot of Walmarts around. And then when you look at the another side of the globe, you look at the enthusiasm. So if you can somehow find the formula to build up enthusiasm, then you'll win. And you know it when you see people running towards police and throwing tear gas back. You see that fear is not functioning. And when you see people being really excited rather than being apathetic. So we're looking at this phenomenon of how you build enthusiasm, how you use humor, how you use anger. Anger was such a powerful emotion in the Arab world. And we also tried to examine this phenomenon of laughter. How humor is used in order to mobilize people, melt fear, and make your movement looking cool. So you develop a positive peer pressure so people join the movement. Now, of course, the year of bad hangover. The parties are very nice, but the real problem with parties is that you wake up in the morning with a terrible headache. And then one of the real questions which pop up in the age of the Arab Spring is, of course, what comes next. And I hate even playing a role and talking about transition. There is about 200 state, non-state, intergovernmental, non-governmental organizations in this country, and probably 3 times more around the globe, who claim to be experts on transition and spend huge money in supporting transitions and building institutions with more or less effect. First of all, we need to understand that this is a 3-stage process. It consists of a sexy phase, critical phase, and slow and boring phase. Sexy phase is opposing the bad guy. This is where all the thrill is. The people go out on the street, they seek change, they go against the dictators, corruption, whatever, big evil companies who are polluting our environment. They tie themselves for the fences of the nuclear power plants. They struggle for gay rights. They feel good, and they feel good with a reason. They gain higher moral ground. They recruit people. They train people. They put people on the street. They get defeated. They achieve victories. They become mainstream. At the end of the day, they may even win in 52% of the cases. They may even win. So it's a really good prospect. The real trouble is once the fireworks and party is over and we are getting out of the champagne, there is a small window of opportunity where government is rolling on the street. The reason why we succeeded in Serbia is because the city hall was constituted the same night of the revolution, so there was somebody to stop people from breaking windows. Because the president, the new president, and the new parliament were sworn within the range of days. So we have this smooth transition from dictatorship to democracy, because the transition is not smooth, and if power lingers between different groups, then the most likely player to jump in and take all the cookies is the military. And this is exactly what happened in Egypt. These guys didn't have prepared institution, and you can't blame them because these guys didn't have the really opposition parties or any kind of structures for the transition period. And they ended up being stuck with SCAF, Supreme Council of Military Army Affairs, Army generals. And military is not really the entity you would pick up to work on your transition. It's in fact the last entity you would pick up to work on your transition. Same work with extremist Sunni. Islamic revolution in Iran really started as a popular revolution against Shah, but it was overtaken by the most organized group because nobody was thinking, what the hell will we do once we oust this guy? And there were many cases where this happened. So preventing your revolution from being overtaken within these critical weeks after the change, it's something that no one movement needs to focus on. And also step 3, building democratic institutions. I really can't tell how you do this. I was proud to work with Bob Hallier on an article called Finish What You Start. And we were just examining the 5 most common mistakes movement make and how to avoid it. First, have a clear vision of tomorrow. One of the reasons why revolutions fail is because people don't know to tell you where the hell are we going. So if you put 15 Iranians to brainstorm in this place to come out with a common vision of tomorrow, first thing they need to tell you is whether they want a secular state or religious. And if they can't tell you, and they go on the street to protest the regime, that it's not very likely, A, that they're going to win, and B, even if they win, they know what to do with this victory. So somebody else will come and take it from them. So having a clear vision of tomorrow really helped Serbia. I'm living in a country where the three main principles of revolution were defined in 1998. And these were a set of freedoms like free and fair elections, freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. And then the second one was peace with neighbors. The third one was getting into European Union. The first two are definitely in place. And guess what? We changed government from 180 degrees. And nobody even questions these three. That's a sign our transition is going in a good direction. Even if I highly dislike the faces in the new government, these guys will never mess with the elections, for example, because they learn a lesson. So, but this is possible because we set up this goal in 1988, and because we were crazy enough to put the pressure on the government. 2000, day one, we made a watchdog campaign to persuade Gingic government to keep up to this promise, and these promises came there. The second thing is to maintain unity. One of the reasons why revolutions fail is that people stay united until the boogeyman is there. So the boogeyman is always the very powerful unity factor. The boogeyman can be a bad ruler, the boogeyman can be the corrupt person, the boogeyman can be the evil corporation, it can be even in some cases the percentage of CO2 in the air. And once the boogeyman is not there, you just lose your unity, you lose your glue. And then people tend to proclaim game early, game over too early in the process before it's really over. And then they don't maintain momentum. The real problem with popular movements, and you will probably laugh, is coming from biology. What do we know about the sharks? These big, ugly animals we are all afraid of. Absolutely. They're on the top of the food chain because of the two things. First, they need to keep moving in order to breathe. If shark stops, shark dies. Second, unlike other fish have fin here. Sharks have fin only here. So they really can't do this aquarium fish retreat. In order to change direction, they need to make the whole U-turn. So movements are very much like sharks. If they stop and lose momentum, like a shark in the net, they died. And then they can't move backwards. They need to make U-turns, they need always to swim forward. And then the last, but not of least important, especially for those who are, for example, following Georgian or Ukrainian example, victorious movements tend to put too much faith in the new elites too early in the process. So please don't trust new elites only because they are new. That doesn't necessarily mean that Saakashvili will hold on to his promises. The good news, at the end of the day, Georgia played out well. And there was a change of the government recently in a very smooth way. And I don't think the new government will differ very much from the old government, at least when it comes to democracy. Ukraine, though, is not playing well. And look at these lists. They were not sure what they want. They couldn't maintain unity. The Yulia and the president split it within a matter of months. They thought they defeated Russians. They didn't maintain momentum, and they thought that they're only because they won the election, they won't lose another elections. And it all happened. And it's very sad example. So where do we go from now? It's $1 million question, and I'm always accused to be an optimist. But I see 4 different scenarios. And when we look at these scenarios, you can see transition. This is where you have a change, and then transition will follow. Sometimes it will be very smooth and very nice, like in Tunisia. Sometimes it's going to be bumpy and shaky in Egypt. But please have patience. And please maintain momentum, because, you know, one of the problems with movements is once they win, they have this real trouble thinking that just because they won the elections, kick the dictator out, or achieved electoral democracy, the Canterbury chocolate will start falling from the sky. No, they won't. There are things to do to build this institution. But we will definitely witness some transition. Then, symbolized by a lovely president, a lovely king of Morocco, but also it could be Tien Shen. I just put the king of Morocco on the slide because he's somebody studying Harvard? Yes. Or his wife? No? Somewhere over here. Well, he's the guy who understood that the change is inevitable, and he moved towards the change. He changed the constitution, he sat down with opposition parties. We call this scenario accommodation. The most focused situation of the accommodation as we speak nowadays is happening in Burma. We didn't believe the generals will do anything else except changing the uniforms or suits, but they did. And now in a place where it was very dangerous to speak loud about the opposition, you can buy the t-shirts with Barack Obama and Aung San Suu Kyi on the street, and you can wear them in public. And I'm planning my next workshop for Burmese downtown Rangoon, and I used to smuggle them across the border for so many years, because their estimate is now we can come, and we can do it on the university, like something like this. Something like meeting Occupy Wall Street in the classrooms of NYU. You can do it in public, no problems. Nobody will come to arrest you or throw a bomb in. And then, scenario of confrontation is the one we are witnessing in places like Syria now, and in part Yemen. Yemen is a strange animal, it's very difficult to define it. But also throughout the African world, places like Swaziland or Zimbabwe, this is where dictators think that they can still achieve something by confronting population. I would recommend to your attention a very full book. It's written by a political editor in Slate magazine. His name is Will Dobson. His book is named Dictators Learning Curve. He has the theory that dictators learn. And then less and less they will pick the path of confrontation, especially faced with what happened to Ben Ali, Mubarak, Saleh or Assad. More and more they will use the scenarios of accommodation, or they will use what Will calls the velvet fist in our law. Like in Russia, it's not prohibited really to have an NGO, but if you have one, you need to label it as a foreign agent. And it's not really prohibited to have the opposition party, but we will shut you down because you don't have a fire extinguisher. And it's okay to run on the elections against Chavez, but only if Chavez holds all the TV stations. So they will find different ways to accommodate, and they learn fast. Where do we go from now? I really don't know, but the only thing is sure. Where do the people from the Arab world find courage and commitment to make what used to be inspiring revolutions into the successful democratic transitions, or they stop somewhere on the way in military juntas or Muslim type of dictatorships? It's yet to be seen. Where are the activists in the Western world, whether we're talking about the good Greeks, Italians, or Spains, or Americans whatsoever, will find a way to define what the hell they want, instead of endlessly repeating what they don't want. It's yet to be seen. But one thing is definite. We'll be hearing more about the people power, and it will shape our world even more in the future. Thank you for your attention. I'm open for questions. Zdravo, ja sam Maša. Zdravo, moja žena se zove Maša. My wife's name is Maša. I'm translating this. Ciao, Maša.
So, 3 quick questions.
Of course.
Answer them whatever extent you wish. So first is just my curiosity of what it was like to organize in Serbia at the time, specifically with sort of street theater pieces that you guys had. What did that look like, and how was it received by the public? Because I, a family development as well, I can't imagine what street theater looks like there. How did you guys plan that? And then the other question I had was regarding your sort of parallel between military organizations and our need to be just as disciplined. But I wonder, where does it differ? Because military organizations tend to be very hierarchical, and all of these movements are not. And how do you ensure unity when you don't have somebody at top dictating? I mean, clearly that is problematic in itself. but how do you ensure unity with so many
Decentralized, yeah.
points? And then the third one was, I guess the boring phase, as you called it, which I thought was interesting. And how did you ensure that the boring phase was kind of carried out in Serbia with, you know, the successes and elections and greater freedom of the press, and who were the players and how did that?
Okay, first, street theater. Street theater was, you pick the battles you can win. So when you're a group of 10 people, you don't call for a march of 10,000 people. Street theater was a very common game in Serbia because of the students' protest 96, 97. And it was also from necessity. Not because we love theater very much, but because we needed to find something to do every day in cold winter 100 days. So you're under pressure to think about something. And of course you think about something staged, something which will look good for the newspaper, something low budget because you don't have money. And OTPOR street theaters were particularly evil. And they were looking far more like Monty Python's Flying Circus. And they were always connected with humor and mocking the regime. And one of the most successful was actually something which would be completely politically incorrect in a place like America. We would came out with a big petrol barrel. We would paint a picture of Milosevic in a barrel. There would be a hole on the top. You would put a coin. This is how you would buy yourself a right to hit this barrel with a baseball bat. And then it would sound boom. And then, of course, there would be a line of people ready to express their love for their leader this way. And you would put it in the main shopping district, of course, where else. And then you move and sit down and drink coffee. And then that's not the funniest part. The funniest part is when police arrive. Because the reason why street theaters were successful in Serbia is that they were always framed as we call them in our workshops, dilemma actions. So this is the framework where we put our opponent. So if he reacts and arrests you, he will regret. If he doesn't react and arrests you, he will regret. And in this particular situation, of course, what the police will do, arrest shoppers. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. And they will be released in 5 minutes anyhow. To arrest us, we are nowhere to be seen. We're already 3 blocks away and having espressos in Marlboro. So you bet they will do the most stupid thing. They arrested the barrel. And the picture of the barrel being dragged to the police car was one of the most famous cover pages of the newspapers in the 90s. And you can see how Russians are doing fantastic stuff to Putin as we speak with street theater. Street theater is a very cool thing when you have a small number of people, friendly media, or the way to use to spread and grow the media. But also they must be a little bit catchy. So the cool thing about street theater is that you want to play the way the people look at you and say, oh, I will do this only if I dare. This is exactly the achievement you want to make, because then people join. If you get away with it, then people join. So it's always a little bit edgy, but it's nothing that people will get shot.
How was the media friendly at that time?
Oh, I mean, at that time you had like 2 independent newspapers and 23 different radio stations owned by local municipalities. So for our audience, that was the media. We didn't care about the state media. And then state media started catching it and actually spitting all over it, which is when we understood we are successful. Then the second question was structure of leadership. This is a very good question, because you can have all kinds of different animals among the movement. You have those where you have a charismatic leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, who are in the same time inspirational public faces, but also CEOs. They're really, running the show. They're giving orders. They're doing stuff like that. And then you have a series of movements where you have a more like symbolic leadership, like Aung San Suu Kyi or Nelson Mandela were really the symbols of these movements. But these guys were arrested for so many years. I mean, Nelson Mandela couldn't efficiently run the movement from Robben Island because it's an island and it's a jail. So, I mean, other people were running the show, but they were more like the flag. And then you have the whole family of movements like in Czechoslovakia, Chile, Serbia, and of course Arab world. There's a cool book by Carr-Ryan called Leaderless Movements. It's a great guy. So he was examining how it works. First of all, we need to know that movements need glue, but glue doesn't necessarily need a person. You need to be a person. In Serbian case, like in anti-war movement, who was the leader? There are these elements of group identity which matters in the movement. talk about the symbols, values, way that people dress, the things people stand for, and this is the glue which keeps the movement together. And then leaders, they are sometimes such a big burden for a movement, because imagine you have only one charismatic person in a place like Syria, he would be shot tomorrow morning, or she. So I mean, and also leaders can be put in jail, and they can be satanized in state media, and they can be expelled. They can, like Morgan Tsvangirai in Zimbabwe, well be co-opted, and become a part of the government, and then the movement loses the momentum. So leaders are sometimes the weak point of the movements, and it's always up to movement to find the best way how to accommodate the situation. And more movements are getting obsessed with being leaderless. But don't mix being leaderless with not being led. You can't win if you don't lead. So when we are talking about a group of people who is standing up in public with strong charisma, or more like, the way the Serbian movement operated was typical political campaign model. There was a democracy in bringing decision, and there was an executive machinery, which was putting the decision in place. So you had a very small group of people which operated as an executive committee, maybe 15 or 20 of them, and then there was like 50 people representing different communities who were kind of the political committee. Well, these guys will discuss where we will speak with the opposition, where we will talk to Milosevic, what we will do with the police. And then the executive committee, whose member I was, in charge for educating activists and setting down the training program, would execute these decisions. And at the end of the day, every single small branch has its own authority. And this, they share symbol, they share politics, they share vision, but you don't really try to micromanage these guys. Because they're young, and if they find their ideas work, they will develop their internal competition. And this will bring blood and energy to the movement. So this is very nicely organized, and you don't really want to try to micromanage your troops. That doesn't necessarily mean that from the strategic point of view, you don't use military principle. You do put your strong points against opponent weak points. Milosevic was a Soviet-type bureaucrat in his suit. He was not a guy like, you can find guys who you dislike, like George W. Bush, but somehow jokes don't stick to George W. Bush because he knows how to play an idiot. He's perfect, he's just this Teflon guy, so these jokes just hit him, he makes the counter jokes, and he comes out looking very cool. So you don't try this on George W. Bush, but you try this on the Shevardnadze type of gray bureaucrats who just don't know what to do, and then they go and arrest you, and then they look like idiots. And this also works look at the Top Goon. This is the puppet show produced by a Syrian Mongolit movement. And this is where you can see Assad talking to himself and getting very crazy, very much like Spitting Image or something like that. These guys, they don't know how to be mocked. So you pick this thing. And then the transition thing, Serbia was lucky to elect the transitional government 4 times in a row. In fact, it is the only Eastern European country where the former communists didn't come back to power in more than 3 electoral cycles. I'm amazed. Now they can, but it doesn't matter anymore, at least from the point of position. I think Serbian transition had 3 strong elements. First, vision was there early in the process, and movement really shifted into the watchdog in the first 2 or 3 years to put the pressure on the new government to deliver. Day after the revolution, OTPOR movement came out with a bulldozer campaign, showing the big bulldozer, which was the symbol of the Serbian revolution, with a title said, we are watching you. Serbia has 4,123 registered bulldozers and about 7 million potential drivers. So that was the message to the newly established government. Like, please don't even think not to deliver what you promised, because we, the people, are watching. And that was the powerful message, because the people wiped down strongman Milosevic a few months ago. And these guys really didn't try to master it. Second, Serbia has been, and he was the engine, the first democratically elected prime minister in Serbia, who was unfortunately assassinated in 2003. But in 3 years, he was really pushing this boat towards the good direction. Then it was very difficult to turn him off. And then third, Serbs are big individuals and don't listen to the authorities. So The real time when I really understand that democracy has come in Serbia was late in 2004. It was in a time after Đinđić, Koštunica formed a little bit more right-wing government. And he has this idiotic minister of education. That was the elderly woman who was very true believer. And she woke up one morning, probably saw Moses from the bush, or I don't know what happened to her, but came to the office with a genius idea to cancel Darwin's theory in school. You know Darwin theory? Huh? So she was wiped out from the political scene within 12 days. Everybody was out. University professors, they start writing petition, meeting with the politicians, went on street, went on strike. Public media were running crazy over her. And even before the opposition parties filed a case against her in the parliament, she needed to resign. This was understood that the spirit is there. Even if it's not on the street every day, if you really make a stupid thing as a politician, you will pay. And these are like three different things.
Thanks for your presentation. I was wondering if you could extend the discussion to the Occupy movement based
Uh-huh.
on your criteria, which you would consider a successful one. It seems like Occupy movement has been criticized a lot for being leaderless on one hand, not looking formal plans on another. And yet, I think that's a very purposeful tactic in some ways, especially in the U.S., where unions, community-based organizations fulfill certain kind of goal of making those kinds of plans. They get traction on issues such as economic justice, and the kind of side of that. The intention is to not really come from a place of making kind of a long-term goal.
I was quite impressed with Occupy movement, first of all because it was the first such movement after the Tea Party in the country, which seems to be very dormant when it comes to the political movements, at least last 20 years. I mean, since anti-war movement. My big shock came when I met these guys and understand that they spend more time on the decision-making process than on actually doing something. And that reminded me on the very early stages of my movement. When we were very small, we were very obsessed with the fact that whoever runs through this door has the same rights as those who are there. But we started being efficient when we started developing structures. And you need structures in the movement. There is absolutely no way that the amorphous mass of people who endlessly debate about absolutely everything, from strategy to everyday tactic, can become a successful movement. Simply there is no time in this world. So I think their decision-making process, this direct democracy which they were practicing, and my opinion was they turned it in a way into a kind of internal religion. They really become really obsessed with this, these general assemblies and all this stuff. And you know, when the only way to reach the decision is to reach the consensus, then every single agent provocateur or a person with agenda can block the whole movement. That's the real trouble with it. And then second, I think one of the things which didn't play well with them is that they insisted on being completely decentralized. You can't have a movement if people in Boston don't coordinate with people in New York. Then it is not a movement, then it's a bunch of independent outbreaks of the stuff. So this horizontal connectivity was very important. Third, and in my case very important, they were very, very good in playing media, but they were very, very bad in branding. I would never, their most strong point was what they were. They were the movement of 99%. They were not Occupy movement. Limiting the name of the movement to one simple tactic out of 220 tactics. I mean, it's like calling your movement boycott movement, or strike movement, or whatever, Lysistratic non-cooperation movement. That's one particular tactic played recently in Angola where opposition couldn't reach a consensus. So the women decided to deny them sex in order to put them in order. So you don't name movement after tactics. So 99 is so much more appealing. So one thing, they were a little bit obsessed with this self-determination process. And then they didn't learn a lesson, in my opinion, from two very powerful movements in the history of this country. one civil rights movement and the gay rights movement. Have any of you ever seen a movie called Harvey Milk? So this should be a class on examining this movement. This is where you see how you start as self-sufficient group of people who think similarly or share a similar sexual orientation. Like Harvey Milk lives happily in his Casper Street in San Francisco, very liberal, surrounded with his gay friends. He decides to run, he loses. Then he tries even more stupid things. He tries to concentrate the people who are like him in order to get the popular vote. He tries, he fails. At the end of the day, he hires a woman to be his PR advisor, and instead of running the campaign on gay rights, he runs the campaign on cleaning the dog's shit in San Francisco, and he gets elected. The lesson here is that in order to win, you need to build from the middle ground. There is absolutely no way that a person appears to support a Wall Street movement and they deny being with him. You need to make alliances. If you want to win, you need to go to the middle ground. You need to talk to the labor unions. If you claim that you're 99%, go and talk to the others who are also 99%. Don't say, we are all 99%, but the cool guys are only those who camp on Zuccotti Park. That was my take. I had two meetings with them. One of them was particularly frustrating. They spent 2 hours in arguing how to tell me what they want, and 1 hour in telling me what they want. And then the second one was better. That was before this big march they had in Chicago. And I must tell you the sad truth. The most vocal and most powerful organizers in Occupy whom I met are aging but very experienced professor of Columbia, Todd Gitlin, who came out with a great book called Occupy Nation. And I was actually meeting them in his class. And Shen Nying, I think I pronounced his surname well, the iconic organizer from Tiananmen Square. So actually these guys were not typical liberal, highly educated, let's legalize marijuana people from Portland, Oregon. These guys were a little bit different. What I'm really interested in is how this movement evolved. We have Occupy Sandy now, we have Occupy Banks now. When they focus on small, tangible victories, they seem to be very efficient. And this is the strategic approach, in my opinion, they should take. Like, I want to get there, but first I'm going to show to the people that I can do this. Then I can do this. And this is how we gain numbers. And this is also how we gain confidence. Because, you know, when you spend too much time debating with too much clever people, you know, you just leave. And what about me? I'm teaching on the faculty. I really support the idea of 99%, but I really don't have time for endlessly debating for hours. So what I really want to know, I want to know how I can participate. Successful movements offer to the people the ways to participate. And successful nonviolent movements understand that their biggest power lies in the fact that, unlike violent movements who rely on healthy 18 to 35, mainly men with some military training, ready to sleep in the jungle on the harsh weather, they can recruit almost everybody. The real trick is to find something for everybody in this movement. So, Serbian movement was successful because we knew the high school kids consider us very sexy. So we find a million of things that the high school kids can do. They can distribute the leaflet, they can do the posters, graffiti, they can put the stickers in elevators. And then the other people were so happy to join us because their kids and grandsons were students. So what will you do with my grandma? She's an 8-year-old pensioner. She definitely can come in the Zuccotti Park or come on the march or play cat and mouse with the police. But if she can do symbolic public lights from her window half an hour every day, if she can beat pots and pans like in Chile in front of her own house, if she can drive half speed, which is also a very cunning way to block the big city in a rush hour, or if she can bake cookies for those who come in Zuccotti Park, then she will claim the part of this movement. We have a list of retired people in Serbia who would be put on immediate execution to call police station by landlines from their home and ask about the activists who were arrested. They were imposing telephone blockades over the police station because they keep calling and calling and calling and calling. So this is the way the nonviolent, the successful movement grows. You need to find something for me. You don't limit yourself to one or several tactics. So these would be my thoughts. But I don't think it's that, because the issue is there. The world is in economic crisis, the social injustice is there. There is a huge demand of the people for a more just world. And even more important, there is this feeling for the whole generation of young people throughout the globe that somehow somebody has stolen their future. And this is going to be moved into action. Whether we call this action Occupy or somehow different. That's my opinion. But then I'm an author. Yes?
Okay. So, short question. What's your definition of success? So in some cases, it's toppling the government. In some cases, it's getting governments to adjust to the needs or demands of the people. Where do you draw the line between success and whatever the side you're opposing actually accommodating the minimum so you can get out of that?
By demands of the campaign. This is how the whole analysis of Maria Stefan and Erica Chenoweth was where the demands of the campaign were met. Sometimes these are very small demands, to remove the corrupted mayor from this town. Sometimes it's big demands. We demanded freedom and free and fair elections and road to EU and peace with neighbors. I mean, Serbs are normally megalomaniacs. So, but when you look at the 10 years after, we achieved some of these demands, or majority of these demands. So whatever movement demands, I mean, if they demand Nestle stop producing specific milk formula, which poisons kids in Africa, and then you organize the whole Nestle campaign, and you really hurt Nestle, and then Nestle stops selling this formula, then it's a successful movement. Whether this changed the world a bit, or they start producing it somewhere else, something completely different, but demands are met.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between taking on a state actor like a government or a dictator and a corporate target? What are the differences that you see in the strategies?
Well, I think it's more or less the same. We've been working with some very interesting group from Nigeria who are opposing the big petrol companies, which are effectively destroying that country and buying politicians the way you buy in Walmart, like they're picking politicians. When you look from the point of the campaign, it's the combination of right targeting, taking the right example. When you look at how you build a movement, you need a similar set of skills. I mean, the modern movements are very much about the propaganda and communication. They're also very much about the volunteer management. This is the new psychology of the movements. But when you look at how your opponent responds, you set the strategy to where it hurts. When it comes to the politician, a public disgrace and public naming and shaming and losing votes, basically, the fear of losing votes is the most powerful driver for the politician. When it comes to companies, it's fear of losing profits. But the best way to attack the company is to attack the brand. So this is very different from attacking the factory or blocking the factory, because companies spend a lot of time in building brands. I will give you an example coming from the United States of America. They're like two absolutely crazy guys, and I'm absolutely hilariously happy to say that these two guys are my friends. The name are Andy Bilbao and Mike Bonanno, also known as a yes man. These guys are spectacular in mocking the companies and making companies looking ridiculous. Only last year when General Electric came out with some crazy figures of how they got successful year, blah, 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 they came out with this fake press release saying that General Electric will give 25% of their income in year 2012 to the kids dying of blood cancer. And then the General Motors need to explain that no, they're not right. I mean, these guys are real experts in this. And there are also other ways, but the main difference is the weak point. The weak point of the politicians is approval rating or number of votes or public disgrace. The weak point of corporations is profit. And when you look at the history, you will go to the very successful campaign, iconic campaign, boycotting the segregation in Nashville. And this was absolutely fantastic example on how you are targeting politicians, we are targeting mall owners. And the whole idea was that we, the black people, are shopping these malls, and you prevent us from eating in this mall. So now you mobilize black people to occupy this amount of counters. Then you know the police will come and create a whole mess by arresting these people, so the sales will fall. In the same time, you organize picketing, so you prevent people from buying in this mall. At the end of the day, you have mall owners on your side, they go to the mayor and they press mayor to end up with this stupid segregation because they are using money. This is a very good example how you mix these two strategies. It has been done very successful in the past. More or less technology of the movement is the same.
Possibly say a little bit about Zimbabwe and the current state of the movement there. There's a non-violent movement, so to speak of. I wasn't really aware that there was much happening at the moment, but
Zimbabwe is an absolutely fantastic case of where really the bad leader can screw the thing. And I know Morgan. I met him once. I worked with some of his advisors. You have this marvelous country which was the breadbasket of Europe, and then you have the aging guy who kind of loses his mind and start pushing us into the form of a dictatorship. And then you have one of the worst situations in the world. Like 7 years ago, Zimbabwe was the world champion in world hyperinflation. They were worse than the Weimar Germany and Serbia, which holds the proud bronze medal. Now, we used to be second. You can't be first in everything like that. The first problem with this opposition movement was that it was incapable of achieving unity. Zimbabwe has a series of very interesting players, and there is this mix of the political party called the Zimbabwean Democratic Party, and then the NGOs. And the NGOs are quite powerful, and particularly some of the labor unions are quite powerful. But there was always this tension between these two, and this unity was never achieved. Second, there is the tremendous failure in strategy. Tsvangirai won elections 2 times. First time he proclaimed the victory, picked a completely wrong tactic, called people to stay in instead of going on the streets or overwhelming state institutions. You know what it means, stay in? How do you measure success? Like, there is less people in the street, and then nothing happened. Second time it was even worse. He won and then he escaped to one of the Western embassies. So I mean, this guy really screwed twice. And then he decided to save Zimbabwe by getting into the government. And even worse, his family was killed under very, very strange circumstances. So if there is hope in the Zimbabwean movement, is that parts of Tsvangirai's parties think that they should change their strategy. Most of Zimbabwean civil rights organizations are pretty active. We work with a particularly promising group called WAZA, Women of Zimbabwe Rise. They're led by iconic, powerful, huge woman called Jennifer Williams. And they do a lot of protesting and boycotting. And the reason why we think they will be successful is they recently, instead of just protesting, they understood that when you're working in conditions of high repression, you don't necessarily want to be the battlefield of the political organizing, because this is where you're going to be beaten. And you probably heard about one of the most successful youth groups in the Egyptian revolution called April 6th. When we were sitting with these guys, I was very particularly curious how come they're using the clenched fist, the symbol of clearly democratic political movement in Serbia, mixed with the name April 6th. To clarify this, April 6th is May the 1st in Egypt. This is the day of the big workers' demonstration in Mahala 2008. So you would expect labor union organization to be named April 6th, basically. And they say we know this strange phenomenon. Every time we come out and demonstrate for political rights, we get tear gassed, while the labor unions, every time they come and protest about the salaries and the rights of workers, they get concessions. So we decided to mix these two and see what it comes out. Women of Zimbabwe Rise launched recently a very cool campaign, and it is related to the small villages and their rights and the access to the drinking water. Most of the rural Zimbabwe has a huge problem with drinking water, and of course you have all the diseases connected with this, malnutrition and HIV/AIDS. So they will start going out and they will block the road until the government fixes the sewer system. And then the government is put into a big dilemma, because if they fix the sewer system, then every village will protest until the sewer system is fixed. And then the people will understand, then putting a non-political pressure on government by political means pays off. And then if they go and arrest people who protest for drinking water for their children, they will become highly unpopular. So I mean, there is a little bit of happening there, but mainly White Tsvangirai is still in seat as a prime minister, and Mugabe is alive and kicking, and he looks like he's going to live 250 years. He's going to be tough.
You talked about the three phases, the easy, sexy phase, a kind of more challenging phase, and then the slow, boring phase. Can you talk a bit more about the slow, boring phase? I'm sure that part of your challenge there is maintaining commitment, keeping people going. They may not see any end in sight or any exciting kind of endpoint. So can you talk a little bit more about that? About the challenges of that phase?
Yes, I mean the main problem is how to, movement is a very vivid, shark-like thing, and how to make a movement into structure. This is $1 million question. And in some cases it's watchdog organizations, and big parts of the Serbian NGO community really came out from this movement, because we needed to rebuild NGO community after the civil rights community, after the revolution. When you're having a dictatorship, civil rights organizations are basically opposition organizations. They're, by very existence, the civil rights organization in Putin's Russia are organized the way the opposition is organized. But like that, you need these organizations to work hand in hand with government, democratic society, blah, blah, blah. So one of the things is transforming this civil rights organizations. And we kind of try to install as much people into this sector after the revolution by focusing on the real problems of the society. So, okay, we achieved political change, but what about the nepotism? We achieved political change, but what about the corruption? We achieved political change, but what about politically untouchable judges? We achieved political change. So somehow you use this power to create a watchdog organization, because especially in Serbia, we were thinking about making out for a political party and run for the office in December 2000 elections. And I was standing on the point that this is a very good idea. And maybe if we did, Ginch would still be alright, and Serbia would be a different place. Making a movement into a youth political party makes sense in some cases, and I would strongly advise that to the people of Egypt, for example. Because having a youth political party in a situation where the average age of the people is 26 makes all the sense. It's a very young community. So this is where the numbers lie. You go and build on numbers. So one scenario may be transforming the movement into civil rights organizations. Another scenario is going political, whether going inside the existing political parties on the party list. Because you want all of these young and elder people mobilized to participate in change. You don't want them to go home. At least you don't want them to go home for a few years. You want to use this energy to move the society into some direction. Whether they are going political through the existing parties or creating their own party, that's a second scenario. And then the third is like a civil society, political scenario, and then watchdog scenario. So one of the things is create an over-entity which oversees the government and uses the credibility the movement had from the struggle to pressure government to deliver. So they are kind of the watchdogs or safeguards of the revolutionary principles. The real problem with this is that to do this, you need structure, and then it needs to become either a political party or a civil rights organization, and then you need funding and this and that. So it can often end up like The OTPOR in Serbia was a very successful watchdog for the first 2.5 years. And then these guys decided to create a political party too little, too late. They couldn't pass threshold. And the movement disappeared. But nevertheless, their role as a watchdog and as actually putting pressure to deliver Milosevic to Hague, for example, like helping new governments swallowing the bitter pills. It was very, very important. So watchdog, build a civil rights, NGO community and civil organizations, or go political. Or a mix of these three.
Maybe a follow-on question. It seemed like there's a phase that you didn't quite mention that I guess I would call it the phase of vulnerability. And I think I watched that with apprehension on television in Egypt, where the army could have used their guns, where their streets weren't packed yet, and yet the nonviolence movement kind of kept them from operationalizing violence, because violence really could have, I think, crushed that.
Absolutely.
Movement.
And there was a little outbreaks of violence, but it was mostly between supporters of Mubarak and the opposition, and a bit between police and the opposition. The reason why that didn't happen is that the strategy of Egyptian movement until Mubarak was on seat was absolutely brilliant. They exactly knew what to do with pillars of support. They focusing directly on going on to military. I was told almost a year before it started in Egypt that the moment for ousting Mubarak would be transition. Mubarak was planning transition for August that year, and he wanted to leave Egypt to his son, Gamal. And the movement absolutely was aware that that was the weak point, because people didn't really want to be sheeps, you know, and that would be very vulnerable and easy to admit. People, Arabs have this dignity, which can sometimes mobilize them fast. Military didn't want Gamal to run Egypt because he didn't have any military credentials. And business community was unhappy with Gamal because Gamal already had like 100 million in his account, and he was well known as a greedy guy. So the fact that it started earlier, it was because the Egyptians were very angry that the bloody Tunisians have done it, and the big Egyptians haven't done it. So it was a kind of the envy thing. But from the very beginning, they knew they needed to keep military neutral, to fraternize with the military. They knew who the key player is. And then, on the other hand, they were doing this from the inside, and then the good Americans were doing this from the outside, from the one point. So it was the combined pressure on the military pillar. So I didn't expect military to shoot into people. But I expected them to be more clever when it comes to whom the power goes, because the moment Mubarak has gone away, the SCAF overtook, and I think that was a huge strategic mistake to the movement. One of the things you do as a successful movement is, the first thing you do on the workshop is please list me the pillars. So if we're living in the United States of America, you list down the most important pillars of this country. And these are, of course, business community, media, president, House, Senate, I don't know. In Egypt, it's military, secret police. It's a very different set of pillars. So what you really try to do when you're building your strategy is to help people from most important pillars. The game over for Milosevic was when we put police to the neutral position. The moment the police said, we'll just sit aside and watch the show, that moment Milosevic was done. Because we knew military will stay neutral. Milosevic wasn't even thinking. I mean, he invited military at the end of the day, but nobody really gives a damn. Because military was a conscription organization, and when the votes were counted in Serbian military after the election, the opposition won 3-1. So I mean, even if they were summoned to do the stuff, it's a very big question where they would turn their rifles, to which direction. They definitely wouldn't shoot at us. And in Egypt, they knew that the military is a big player, and they were putting the kids on the tanks from day one. And nowadays, it's what they are doing now. The same game, who is going to control military, is played as we speak. The protesters are, you know, fraternizing with the military. Morsi has tested military yesterday. He called military to protect the offices of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they basically said no. And this is very interesting development, which we're going to look. It's different set of pillars now in Egypt. The struggle is about the constitution. The huge struggle is with the judiciary, where you have the Mubarak elements, the liberal elements, the Morsi elements fighting. They will go on strike and they will try to oust the Constitutional Assembly. And it's very difficult how this thing will play. One of the things Mubarak is trying to do with the decrees is to overtake the labor unions, because the labor unions are very powerful. So we'll see, now this struggle is a little bit more dispersed. But in the Mubarak time, it was between liberals here, hidden Massenburg support here, who is controlling the military over here, and how to squeeze good Americans to say goodbye to Mubarak. And they exactly knew what they played, and they played very well. That's it.
Well, thank you so much.